Today, I'm joined by a gentleman who's going to attempt something extraordinary. Dominic Shadbolt, also known as the MS Guide, who's had multiple sclerosis for over 30 years, is going to cycle across Canada 5,000 miles in an attempt to raise $1 million for multiple sclerosis charity. Dominic is an active member of the MS community, a blogger, a YouTube creator, active poster on Twitter and Blue Sky. Good to see you, Dominic.
Good to see you too, Brandon. Thanks for having me on.
So, we're going to get into the details of the charity, what you're trying to achieve, the technicalities of the race. But first, can you tell us a little bit about your background, your history of multiple sclerosis, how this all came to be?
Sure. That's a lot. I'll try and chunk it up. I'm about to be 56 very shortly, so I'm definitely on the wrong side of 40, as somebody pointed out to me the other day. But every time you get to sort of 50 or 55, you think that's just about right. And anyway, I was diagnosed when I was 23. I went out for a run because I thought I'd gained a lot of weight. When I had a job as a drug rep back in the day, and it was all sitting around in hotels and eating and what have you. And I gained a lot of weight. Thought I'd go for a run. Looked at my feet. I remember it was a very scenic thing. Looking at Windsor Palace, where the Queen sometimes lives. I lived in Windsor and the palace there, and you're running down the Great Mile. And I looked at my feet, and it was like I'd stuck my fingers in the plug socket. That the hermit sign. It was just this incredible buzzing, and I thought that's odd. And long story short, I was speaking to a friend at a party we're having. She's a cardiologist, but she said she remembered immediately from her medical training that this probably wasn't a good thing. And I said, look, I don't want to bug you, but what's the score? And she went, wait a month, and if it still happens, go see your family doctor. So I did, and I ended up being diagnosed. And when I was diagnosed, I was 23, there were no drugs. There was nothing. They were just completing the trials of beta interferon in the US, where you live. But I live near Oxford in the UK, everyone. You're over in where? California, aren't you?
In Los Angeles, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So we're about 8 hours apart. It's 6 in the evening for me, 10 in the morning for you.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I did what a lot of people do, I think. I just ignored it and hoped it would go away, or just, MS. And also young males, I think particularly, you're unbreakable. You own motorbikes, you do things like this, you're not going to die. It happens to somebody else, you're not going to be disabled. I made jokes about wheelchairs when I got diagnosed with my brother and said, well, let's design an off-road wheelchair. And it never came to be. I don't think I'm fortunate to have MS, but I think relatively within the MS thing, I have been fortunate in the sense that I know some people that it really hits them really hard right out of the trap. So I'm obviously not one of them. I have always been active. I've never been active to be fit. I've just done stuff which has kept me active. I've been into cycling or climbing or whatever. I hate running, by the way. And but that's always kept me fit, if that makes sense. It's not the other way around. And which is very fortunate. You look back now and think, I'm really lucky to have that sort of mindset of doing stuff and then being fit as a result. I got into sort of, should we say, the whole MS side of things, because I used to be in consulting and sales, IT, always sales. Then I had my own business. I had a phenomenal accident cycling, and I broke my femur, and that smarts a bit. And I was bolted back together, and I was lying in a hospital bed, and I think it's because I was so high on the painkillers. Well, that's my excuse. And a friend said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I think I should go to university. He said, that's good. He said, try and get it done before you die. And I'm like, oh, thanks. And so in my mid-40s, I went to university. I did a BA, and then I went and did an MSc. And then I was feeling really grumpy when I read something that one of the government bodies here in the UK had about rail cards and disability rail cards. And the legislation says that MS is a disability from diagnosis. End of story. There's no sort of how disabled are you. It's in the legislation that MS is there. And I wrote to them and said, well, you say it's only for people that are disabled to a degree, and I don't think you can say that, do you? I said, why don't we go to court and we'll have a little chat in court and we'll let the judge decide, because you seem to think you can decide government legislation and I'm not so sure. But then you get those letters, it's like, dear Dr. Beaber, in this instance, and you think, okay, I've won. And I got a dear Mr. Shadbolt, in this instance, and I was posting it everywhere, and people still sometimes struggle with it in the UK because they can't believe they're entitled to it. It's not a big deal. It gives you 30% off rail fares. I mean, it's handy. But then you kind of get on people's radars. And I was speaking to one of your colleagues one day, who's over in Ohio. He's got a YouTube channel. And he really did talk me into starting a YouTube channel. And I kind of went, you know what it's like when you see yourself on screen and hear yourself and think, the first time. Do you remember when you first did your first few recordings, Brandon?
I do remember that.
Yeah. And it's not such a big deal now. But it was back then. And I've now got 4,500 followers or something. And I try to sit in I won't tell you what to do space. I've got MS. I happen to work with a lot of medics like you and stuff. I'm, Professor Schmerer at QMUL in London, particularly. I have huge respect for all the effort that it's taken you to get your degrees and what you've had to learn. But I also think you're somebody who's gone to school and studied something different from me. We're all people. I want patients to feel that I can talk to you, or I can talk to them, or I can talk to anyone, frankly, and hopefully just bring it into a way. Sometimes people need to hear it from another patient. Sometimes they need to hear it from you, the doctor. It all depends. But that's my aim. It's pretty simple. I don't make I think I make a stunning amount of £30 a month from it. But that's not why I do it.
You're not getting rich on YouTube. Neither am I.
No, I think, well, you know what somebody said to me? Well, you're going to make it interesting and fun. And I said, well, it's kind of tough to make anything fun about MS. I said, I'll try and major on the interesting, but neither of us is going to be Mr. Beast, are we? So it's, that's just the way it goes. But, and then many people have heard of Prof G, Gavin Giovannoni, Professor Gavin Giovannoni, etc. He was my neuro for a while. He's retired now. I was chatting to him just before he retired, and it was one of those sort of conversations where you're spitballing, and it was like, and I said, that sounds like a good idea. And then I said, I'm not so comfortable with $1 million. I think that's a bit much. And he was like, no, go for the stars type thing. And then I thought, okay, fine, fair enough. And it's a memorable amount. And the way I can tell it's the right amount is the Brits generally go, oh my God, that's too much. And most of the Americans go, is that all? And so you think, I'm somewhere in the middle. No one's going to say, Dominic, you raised $750,000, you suck. It's going to be, I'm definitely going to go for it. But hey, who knows? So Gavin and I had this chat. I decided to do this. It was just before Extrams, that big MS meeting. It's just spiraled out of control. It is, I can't quit. I can't fail. I can't, I have sponsors, I have clothing sponsors, nutrition sponsors, bike sponsors, all these people. And I'm thinking, oh my God, do they know something I don't?
Well, I think if anyone can do it, you can. I know you do this a lot. So just going back to when you were diagnosed, what was it like to be diagnosed when there were no treatments? Did you have other relapses? And, did you later get started on medication? What was it like to kind of experience the change in the culture and treatment of MS over the years? I know a lot of people may assume that because you're going to cycle 5,000 miles that you don't have any symptoms of MS, but apparently that's not the case, right? Can you get
it's affected my eyesight a lot. These are some of the most expensive lenses you'll buy. It's just because they're trying to, and they're not perfect, but they're correcting some of the issues with MS. They enable me to still drive and things like that. But there were no drugs. You just put it out of your head because it was a case of, well, I've got a friend who was a fighter pilot, and they all had an expression about the risks they took because they went to war. I sort of grew up in that time when people had been to Iraq twice, Afghanistan, what have you, and it was a real risk of dying. And they just said, well, if Jesus wants me for a sunbeam, then I'm off. And that's kind of how you feel about your MS when there's nothing that can be done these days. I mean, you've witnessed a change. Yeah. I mean, you must have been a med student, what, 20 years ago?
Started in 2005.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So about, yeah. And, but the changes that you've seen in the sort of the availability of drugs, the recognition that it's a sort of serious condition. Also now people changing to the fact that if we get in front of it, we can really mitigate the effects because you used to have to stand back and see what happened. And I remember saying to the doctor, what's going to happen? He went, good question. And I went, right. Okay. It was just, either you let that drive you into the ground or you just think, maybe a psychiatrist would say, well, that's dreadful, but the coping mechanism was just ignore it and carry on because there was no other choice.
I mean, I definitely remember the times when MS was different. When I was a fellow, we'd be admitting patients to the hospital. They had bad MS flares, getting plasmapheresis. And, just the other day, I had a patient who really was not comfortable taking some of the newer, stronger meds, very conservative, and they were taking glatiramer or acetate and had a very bad relapse. And, it's a reminder to me, this is why we're doing this. This is the purpose of these newer drugs. So I can definitely see the difference.
Yeah, I mean, I people say why? Because I mean, I've had five now. I went on to beta interferon. It was the first one. Then I had glycemic acetate, Copaxone, depends where you are. Then I went on to the trial for Tecfidera, dimethyl fumarate. Then I had ocrelizumab, Ocrevus. And then I thought, I can't, I want to put it behind me as much as I can. And I had alemtuzumab. And, it's punchy, but I can wash my hands and go, right, that's it, done, goodbye. Yeah, I got to have my bloods monthly, but, and thankfully in the MS community, the colleagues I have organized it so I can go by the MS centers in Canada and have my bloods done. It's one of these silly considerations that wouldn't cross regular people's minds, but you're thinking, I really want to get them checked. And, but I say to people, the whole point of MS drugs, they're chemical breaks. They're not perfect, but they increase the time between relapses and they decrease the severity of them. And that's broadly what you're looking for. And you can either have the old drum breaks, which I call the sort of rebiff and, what do they call it, the crabs? Or you can have the sort of modern ceramic disc breaks, which is the sort of much newer drugs. But like you say, just had this conversation with somebody. They're petrified because everybody reads the side effects in isolation. But one of my degrees was about your communication and risks and things like this. And when you say to people, have you read the data sheet for ibuprofen that you take? Do you understand the risks you take driving a car, maybe owning a firearm, whatever it is? And then you start balancing these things up. All of a sudden, these standalone looks horrendous risks become far more sort of normalized and in context. And I think it's often people don't think about the context of the risks they take in life versus these medication. And also they don't think about, if I can't walk in 20 years, I can't turn the clock back, but how much is walking in 20 years worth to me? It's not a guarantee, but it's a far more likely scenario if you take the good meds sooner. But again, it's up to the individual. Ultimately.
Yeah. Now, to get into the technicalities of cycling 5,000 miles, a neighborhood kid stole.
I'm trying to avoid it.
A neighborhood kid stole my bike when I was 8 years old, so I haven't ridden a bike. Maybe if I have an injury, I'll cycle on a stationary bike, and in 30 minutes, my quads will be burning up. So, is it even possible to cycle 5,000 miles? Are you some kind of elite athlete? Like,
yeah.
Background and what are your training methods?
I wish. Number one, Brandon, like anything, whether it's studying for a big exam or, it's anything big that we're not used to, you have to chunk it up. It's that whole thing about, how do you eat an elephant? Well, in small chunks, and I look at it, 80 kilometers, so it's 50 miles a day. So that's 25 miles before lunch, 25 miles after lunch. So that's 12 and a half miles and then have a nice break. 12 and a half miles, take at least an hour off for lunch. Because MS, like a lot of people, fatigue. There's no point in me smashing it and trying to get from one side to the other as fast as I can, because I'll probably just blow up in the middle. But back to quads, muscles, any muscles. I mean, anything you train, whether it's your brain or your biceps or I started off deadlifts. I could do about 50 kilograms. Now I can deadlift about 100 kilograms, which is 2.2 pounds to the kilogram. So what's that? 220 pounds roughly, yeah? But you don't do a lot, but, you're just building up your muscles for cycling. And you just have to, and I can see my heart rate data from all the training. I can see how it's not as high. It takes longer to get it higher. It recovers quicker, and it's just a muscle. You train it, your heart, it's like anything. So I'd rather train hard and ride easy, essentially. I don't want to get out there and go, oh my God, this is dreadful. I want to be going, right, I thought about this. we're there.
Now, I knew
So,
you're using a special bike, right? You're using a high-tech recumbent bike. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
oh, I could nerd out. I'm a bike geek. But it's a recumbent trike. But I've got the one with I've got a full carbon tub seat. I've got a different ceramic bottom bracket. I've got eccentric rings. I've got a different chain. I mean, it's just, I've got a special hub in the back, called a roll-off hub, which is 14 speeds. It's all internal because I don't want to be doing maintenance. I'll be fairly knackered, I reckon, so tired out. I don't want to be messing around with my derailleur. You know what I mean? So it's good tires, tubeless, all that kind of stuff. You can't buy yourself advantage. You can certainly buy making some stuff easier, but you still need to have the training. You can't spend the money and then not train as a result. And also, if you think about it, my feet are out in front. I can send you a few pictures if you like. But with this seat, when your feet are clipped into pedals, you can come to a halt and just fall asleep. It's quite comfortable. It's slower up hills, but recumbents are slower up hills. Yeah, you just have to go into a lower gear and spin. And I'm taking about 80 pounds of gear, maybe tops. But everything. I'm doing it self-supported. I haven't got a support car. Though a fellow MSer I bumped in today went, "I'll drive the car." I said, "Well, your husband give you the time off. I'd have to speak to my wife to tell her that." And she went, "Yeah, maybe." But yeah, it was. But she's another gym buddy. I met her at the gym. She's phenomenal. She was really, really heavy, and just sat up one day and said, "This is no good." Started getting onto decent DMT and is now so fit and active. And it's one of these, wow, well done, good for you things. But something clicked in her, Brandon. I don't know what it is, but it just clicked. It's phenomenal. But yeah, I don't think she can follow me across Canada. I don't think it would work out. I'd have to buy a motorhome. And I haven't got that kind of money, nor do the sponsors.
Yeah, that's even more impressive to do it on your own and carry 80 pounds of gear. That seems like a lot to me. I know you're really into lifestyle in general and you keep a specific diet. What kind of diet do you keep? And is that more for management of multiple sclerosis? And do you have to modify that with cycling so you can get enough calories?
I think it's very flattering that you think I actually stick to a diet. I know the principles. I do certain things. Okay, I have always, again, I was reading something. I'm a Gen X, I think, or something. I was born in 1969. You didn't get much prepackaged food. My mother made a point of teaching us to cook. I've always cooked from fresh. I bake. It's quite easy when you're used to it, I think, because her mantra was, if you can read, you can cook, and maybe not very well, but you can. If you follow the instructions. It's like surgery, I imagine. There's some people who are just more gifted at it than others, but you can essentially read the manual, can't you? I mean, it's now getting, my neurologist, Charmley, said to me, "Oh, Dominic, what are you going to eat?" And I said, "Every single thing I see." Because I'm starting to eat more and more and more. I mean, it's trying to keep the weight loss from not happening. Because we're talking kilos, and I went from 78.5 kilos at the beginning of this, no, about the middle of last year, I was 78.5 kilos. I'm now 74.5. And it's just like, oh God, I think I managed to get up to 75 over Christmas by slacking off and eating everything. But it is, one of my sponsors is Torque, who are one of these nutrition companies. They actually have a few products that are used by the NHS for diabetics, but those sports gels and things like that, they've sent me all these. I mean, they're lovely, but I would never ever choose to eat one because they're functional things. When you need fuel for your muscles, when you need to recover, all this recovery stuff. And I swore I'd never be one of those people who drank whey protein shakes, but guess what? I'm there after the gym going, I'll just neck down 750 mil of a whey protein shake, and it's just, none of them taste nice, but they're necessary, It's a bit like having a DMT. It's not great, but it has a function greater than what it is at the time.
Well, I think it's good to know that you don't necessarily have to be extraordinary strict with the diet. There's still hope that you could do well with multiple sclerosis even after many decades of having it. So let's get into the charity. I mean, the goal of this is to raise money. Can you tell us a little bit about the charity and what you're hoping to achieve? How will this benefit people with MS?
So I think there's two sides to fundraising for, and when people say fundraising for MS, I always say there's the lab coats and test tubes, which is entirely admirable, and I'm pretty keen that they worked it out. But finding a cure essentially. What's the cause of MS? How do we make a cure? We need to know the cause. And then the other side is patient-led, I would say, and or sort of patient focused at brain health. Yeah, you can't design brain health in a lab. We all know, or many of us know, what brain health is. It's those components of taking an effective DMT, but it's exercising, sleeping, eating properly, being the reasonable weight, not smoking, all these things. Yeah, because we know what a positive effect it has on the brain, and then we know that when you've got MS, that's an even more positive effect. And my view is MS, you can't just take a pill and hope, or a drug or an infusion or whatever. Yeah, you have to play part in the game too. And brain health is this. It's becoming more of a thing. It's being spoken about, and NMOSDs sort of coming into it as well, and starting to come with sort of moving into the same space as MS. Certainly from the drug company side, you saw that a lot at the latest conferences. But this charity is through a US nonprofit, in fact, run by one of your colleagues called Augusto Mirabile, MD, who's the lead neurologist at Rush in Chicago. And he and his wife, Kathy, have the Brain Health Center of the Rockies, is a nonprofit that they started. And so the money's going in there because we want it to be global, because you can't, I didn't want it to go to a society, because bless them, some of the societies, not all of them, I would argue they might have slightly high overheads these days and may not always be as laser focused as you would hope they'd be. And we want this to go to patient initiatives. So it could be a society who's sponsoring a group of patients, say in your neck of the woods, where they're all trying to get together and do something. It could be you leading an initiative. Prof. Schmier is sort of heading a group of people of all different disciplines that are working out stuff for brain health, because frankly, it's a bit like the YouTube channel I said earlier. Sometimes people need to hear it from a doctor, but sometimes they want to hear it from another patient. Patients leading patients. You know what it's like when there'll be patient leaders. There'll be natural patient leaders, and doing that. And it's, whether it's in the United Arab Emirates or the US or Canada or Greenland, I mean, we want to make it so that people can apply. And we've got a separate board with me, Professor Schmier. Augusto is going to be sort of part of it, but to ensure that the money doesn't get conflated with anything else, we have a separate pot essentially. So RC4, the digit 4, ms.org. If you go to RC, right, Canada, 4ms.org, it just tells you how to donate there. And the sponsors have just been, one sponsor is paying for all the social media.
Yeah,
so there will be
links to all Dominic's social media
yeah.
below, and if you want to contribute to it, I did give you a small percentage of that 1 million, so you can check and see if that.
Did you? Oh, thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's, yeah, I have to rely on them to report, so I'm going to speak to Kathy, because but thank you, that's really kind. Gavin Giovannoni has, Charmaline Nonapovin has. It's all sort of like, oh, that's really nice. It just makes you smile, and you think that's fantastic. There's a lot of money to go, but we think if we get the message out across the world, it doesn't take much where people give $1, $5, $100, whatever it is, what they can afford. It's soon going to add up.
Yeah, and I did see some of the publications, from the charity, and they're trying to provide information to people with MS. And I think that's very underrated. In many ways, our treatments of MS are actually pretty good for many, not all people with MS. And I think when people are informed and they know what the risks and benefits of treatments are prior to going into the doctor's office, they're going to make better decisions, kind of similar to Lance Armstrong's charity, just giving people information about cancer. When people have knowledge, they're more empowered to help themselves. I know, you've been through a lot in your life. You've been through many decades of multiple sclerosis. It takes a lot of mental toughness to do something like cycle 5,000 miles. No doubt halfway through, you're going to feel like quitting, I would imagine.
Not just the once, I imagine. There'll be days. Well, you know what it's like. Anything you do, as long as, I mean, you did your medical degree. There must have been like weeks where you thought, am I doing the right thing? Is this the right way to go in my life? And then other times it's absolutely, something happens and you just like, yep, this is me. This is what I want to do. This is it, and you sort of focus on the bigger picture. But everyone's done something hard, I think, or had to push through because anything worth doing, I think, is not going to be easy. If it's easy, it's not worth it in that sense, yeah. And the trike, someone said, "Oh, you taking the trike home?" I went, "You're kidding. When I get off that thing, that's the last I ever want to see of it." But I'm actually donating it to a disability cycling charity in the Rockies called Rocky Mountain Adaptive for people with not just MS, but also they help people get outside. So whether in the winter it's doing the adaptive skiing, or in the summer it's doing the adaptive sports like cycling, so mountain bikes or road or whatever. I'm not a fan of bears, so I like to stay to the roads. It's not a guarantee, but you'll see far fewer bears than you would if you're cycling through the woods.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so in terms of
kind of
like the
thing.
resilience aspect, let's say someone's watching this, they're relatively newly diagnosed with MS, a younger person, maybe in their 20s and 30s. They don't know what the future portends. What kind of advice would you have to that person?
Yeah, I say this with a 22-year-old daughter. When I look back on me, and I'm not the same as everybody else and vice versa, but I had plans. I didn't realize my first hint of MS was when I was 14, where I was being driven to school and I was idly covering one eye going, one eye's different to the other. Because I've got this wonky prescription, because I thought I'll just be a pilot, like my dad was, and my grandfather, and my stepdad. And it's just, I was a plane mad kid. And you look back and you think, you can either focus on everything that's been taken from you, and there have been things. I've had to stop riding motorbikes. I can no longer shoot. I used to do that competitively. Um, the shooting, not the motorbikes. Uh, it's like breaking my femur. I can't run. I look like I'm trying to pick up sailors. And I don't know if that's a PC thing to say. I apologize. You can lament it, but the fact is it's not coming back. So focus on two things. It may never happen. Yeah. I mean, look at me, 30 years in, I can ride across Canada, so you might be like me. You may not just be like off the cliff. I've got a friend of mine, she's Parkinson's, and I said, well, it potentially could get no worse than this. She just takes drugs, and you wouldn't know to look or talk to her. She's actually my PA for this whole trip. But it's just deal with it when it comes. Don't obsess about something that may never happen. It's really hard because, you and I know the stats. So my view is focus on what you can do and not on what you can't, because otherwise it'll drive you mad. It's down to you. It's your own mental resilience. It'll really just, I see people drive themselves into the ground, and you think, don't do that to yourself. But you can't tell somebody, just to pull their socks up, if you see what I mean. It's tough. I mean, you must see it different, a whole range of different people. There's just sometimes you just wish somebody would not pull their socks up, but like try and look on the bright side. That Monty Python thing where that the Life of Brian, when they all start singing, they're nailed to a cross, and he starts singing, always look on the bright side of life, Eric Idle. And I think, yeah, you've got to, it's just, it's that eponymous film, but yeah, look on the bright side. Otherwise you will go mental.
Any final thoughts on the upcoming bike race or your experience with multiple sclerosis over 30 plus
Well,
years, or any wisdom for the audience?
number one, it's not a race. It's me. I start in Halifax and I'm going to Vancouver. And the aim is, for me, the challenge is to get it done. And, you monitor your power output, your heart rate, your calories and everything, because you need to get, it's not a today thing or a tomorrow thing. It's a up to 4 months thing, I think. So and hopefully it won't be interrupted by the forest fires that we often get in Western Canada, because they can ruin air quality. Not that I should be cycling into a fire, but the air quality, if that's ruined, I may have to just pull up for a week or two. Who knows? But I think that's probably the single biggest risk to, the completion. MS, it's been up and down, and it knocks you in the head. And I'm all happy today, but there have been times I woke up, I suddenly lost about 10% function in my right leg. And you think, is this anything to do with the dynamic hip screw I've got from breaking my femur, or is it the MS, or, etc. And then it takes a while to realize that it's not coming back. You've got to work around it, neuroplasticity, do the exercises, make sure everything's strong, but it's not coming back. Clearly, it's been a year, at least it's not coming back. So, and if it does, happy days, but not in the short term. And I also think I've done everything I can with the drugs. You know, I've been an active participant in this. I haven't been passive. I've tried to take it on and take the drugs as and when they're available, and then do the things that I can do. But I have not been perfect, Brandon. There have been a few times in my life when maybe a cigarette has passed my lips. So it's, I am far from perfect. Generally associated with alcohol. Once you've had a couple of beers and your friends are smoking, and you're thinking just the one. But and it's not right, but you think none of us are saints. So it's but MS, you kind of just gotta take it as it comes. If that makes sense. It sounds facile to say, but it's so different for everybody. I mean, you get to see a ton of people, in your professional career, and I dare say, there's the whole range of A, approaches to it, and B, the way it's affecting people, and you're probably better able to reflect on that and give a better reply than just, one person.
Well, the
Yeah.
good news is things are definitely getting better overall on average. Of course, there's a huge range. I mean, I'm very impressed, Dominic. Cycling 5,000 miles with or without MS in any amount of time is a tremendous achievement. I wish you good luck in your training and with the actual, travels and raising the $1 million. I think you got a good
Would,
chance.
would, would you like to come along for any of it?
Unfortunately, I don't think I would last more than 30, 40 minutes in my
Is your diary booked? Is it? Your diary is blocked already. That's a pity.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't get that much time off work. I'll
Yeah,
include again some links to social media, and if you want to contribute, I'll include the link to do so as
thank
well.
you. Yeah.
Good luck, Dominic.
Brandon, I really appreciate you speaking to me about this. And if there's anything I can do for you, or if anybody wants to ask me questions, they can do it through you, or they can jump on my social media, as you say, you'll post it and ask them to me, because I'm happy to answer people's questions.